And we're back. We're back. The famous trio are back. Very nearly was a duo, needless to say. But we are very, very grateful that Mr. Carolan has been able to grace us with his presence, albeit with a piece of toast in hand. You were spotted there. How are we, guys?
Good. Thanks a minute, Nora. Good. Yeah, feeling good today.
Yeah, really well. Thank you. I'm really good.
No. Look at this food.
You're not allowed to eat.
It's been a busy day.
Yes, exactly. So, and it's much better not to be doing this in the car. So we were considering doing an empty chair. Mark the empty chair. Gary and I were discussing that before we started.
It'd be nice if you could have just had that the box with him, without Mark, like with the nice background and the piano.
Excellent. Well, it's lovely to see you both. It's been, a month? Who knew so much fun could happen in a month? And almost Christmas as well. Have you got snow?
No.
So half of England has got snow.
We seem to be the only place in the UK that doesn't have snow at the moment. But yeah, up in the hills and the Scottish borders, apparently a couple of the towns near me have had snow, but up here, no.
That's mad. What about you, Mark? Snow?
Well, no, but where I flew to today, was covered in snow, and the pilot, for a 50-minute flight, took 2.5 hours because he wouldn't land in the snow. And so we just circled for about 2.5 hours, which was interesting because
he wouldn't land. He clearly didn't have unshakable belief in his ability to land in the snow. Now, isn't that amazing?
Now that is a segue.
Well, given that's what we're meant to be talking about this evening, and I'm sure there's a few people who probably rocked up wanting to hear about that, other than us talk about the snow, which we know we can all do very well, talking about the weather.
That was a fantastic segue. So he clearly didn't. And I was wondering, I feel it's a really interesting one to get into, right? Because I feel that I've been on that flight now a few times, right? And so it's flying from Dublin to Kerry in Ireland. And I don't know if you recall being on flights where the landing, the airplane bounces off the runway. It's like, bang, and hops up and bang. And I've forgotten what a landing like that was up until when I did that flight for the first time about 3 months ago. And we hit the runway. I was like, oh my God, what happened there? And even this evening on the way home, bang, we hit the runway again. And it dawned on me that the guys who are flying these planes, the reason why we hit the runway so hard, because I'd forgotten what a landing like that was like, is because this is a really short hop. So the brand new pilots, so the inexperienced pilots who are doing it. So I think you're completely right. This guy today on the way down, he came through the clouds to find a snow-covered runway and went, nope, not touching that. And so he went straight back up again because he didn't believe in himself, But eventually he did land the plane, and he did announce to everyone that I'm landing because, it's now legally okay. It's below the requirements, etc. We got to the ground. There was snow there, but there was no snow on the runway. It was completely just water at that point. Like, I was wondering what happened in between the first attempt at a landing and the last attempt at a landing. Where did his belief come from? I was actually saying this to someone on the way down the road. Did he have a conversation with someone? Did someone talk him through the process in order to allow him to actually do the thing that he was supposed to do, to actually land the plane, Because I'd say that would be a very interesting conversation. I even saw the pilot afterwards as he was walking out, talking to the staff on the plane, and you could see the kind of nervous excitement in him after he had landed the plane. So clearly that was the first time he had landed a plane in snow, which I think is probably not something too many pilots do. But it's a really interesting thing about where his belief was that he could or couldn't do that.
It's really interesting you say it, because I also then have gone to the place of what is the impact to everybody who was on that plane while you were circling for 2.5 hours, because there's got to be that lack of self-belief in not feeling comfortable enough to be able to land a plane has got to have had a ripple effect on everybody who was on that plane. Sure,
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of tension there. People were there for meetings for different reasons, for flying down. So there's probably that, and I'm sure he could feel that. But then he also works for Ryanair. He probably had Michael O'Leary on the phone going, "It's costing me money if you're in the sky." I'm not paying.
the price of fuel, it would have cost a bomb to be up there.
What I was wondering was like, it's a Ryanair flight. There's probably just enough fuel to get to Kerry. Like, how long can we stay up here for?
Yeah, and 2.5 hours up in the air just circling is not how best to use it.
And that's an interesting thing that puts the pressure on us too, isn't it? That's a very external, bar the thing he had to do. There's the external pressure of everyone else and their expectation on him to deliver on what he had to do.
And I think that's a really good point, because I think that can really make our belief in ourselves wobble at times, can't it? You know, when there is that external pressure
that's when doubt creeps in, doesn't it? And so for him today, that would have been quite an exciting thing to do. And whenever, as humans, we do anything out of our comfort zone, if this was new to him, this is out of his comfort zone. So doubt will definitely creep in. It always does. It's not a bug. That's a feature of being human.
Yeah.
That fear keeps us alive, and it keeps our senses sharp as well. So his senses would have been sharp. He'd have been really aware. He'd have been very in the present moment of what was going on. But doubt would have been very loud. And as Mark was saying there, I wonder who he leaned on in order to make him feel comfortable, to have the confidence to do it, because he obviously didn't have the experience at that point to lean on. He wasn't deeply grounded and secure in himself as the pilot, thinking, right, I've got all these hours behind me. I've landed here, there, and everywhere. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take these people to the ground and let them get on with their day. So imagine, as Mark said, he may have spoke to someone senior or somebody who's, talked him into how to do that. He will have had the training, but what he doesn't have yet is the belief, because he hasn't got the confidence that comes from doing and doing and doing and doing. And that often happens to us in life. And often we get held back because the fear takes over, and we've got no well to go to. We haven't got that experience. We haven't. And if we don't then go and seek outside support and somebody to sort of reassure us and point us in the right direction, not having unshakable belief means we limit ourselves, means we play small, and means we don't fulfill our potential. That guy today fulfilled his potential.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, because I think you make a really good point there. It's like, drawing on the confidence, etc., etc. But we talked about this before, about this idea of self-trust, and that what happens when the world is, or the rug is pulled from beneath your feet, and everything that you've actually got no stability. So actually the world around you, is making you, doubt, not have belief. And then the world internally has fundamentally changed. And actually what you've got is, just chaos, really. And so what do you do with that? Because, that's a wholly different thing, isn't it? And where do you even start? But yeah, I think, so many themes there in terms of, who do we lean on? How do we shift that narrative? What are the signs of that we're lacking? Is self-belief, I was questioning this earlier, is self-belief the opposite of self-doubt? Are they just slightly different? I don't know. What do you think? Mark's smiling.
It's a lovely question. I think it's a very interesting question. Is self-belief the opposite of self-doubt? And I would say no, it's not the opposite. No. Because, like, I was talking today about there being a lie in every belief, So if there's a lie in every belief, then that means self-belief is a lie as well. Yeah. So that's an interesting conundrum. So if it's a lie, and I would often talk about this. I've given talks around well-being and a lot of things. I talk about beliefs in it, and I'll talk about how you can break down beliefs. And one of the things I say about it is, one way to examine a belief is it useful? And I always give the example of a boxer walking into a ring. So if a boxer goes into a ring, and let's say he is 20-1 underdog, he's fighting a world champion, he still has to believe he can win that fight. Because if he doesn't believe he can win that fight, he has no business in that ring, and he's going to get himself hurt in that space. But he believes he might get a lucky punch, he'll be able to defend. He has this belief in himself. Is it true Probably not. But is it useful? Absolutely. It's really useful in that situation. It's very useful to think you are a great boxer, or you can win a fight if you're in a boxing match. But it's still false belief. It's still not actually true. It's not something that you can actually rely on. And I think there's a lot of that, like, you know, there's a need to find the truth in a situation, because rather than self-belief, self-trust is a much stronger piece, because that's true. That's who we are. That's the identity. That's the identity part of it. But that's only the identity because we've broken down the identity that lives in the belief side of it. Because we do all have this fantasy identity of ourselves, don't we?
Of course, without a doubt. And I think, and this is what I was trying to play around with earlier, was, you know, this whole difference between self-belief, self-doubt, self-trust, and is it all component part of a continuum almost, where self-trust is, you know, to your point, Mark, the inner identity, the sense of self. Then there is the aspiration, which is the self-belief of the end game, as it were. And then the self-doubt is almost the challenges that might happen in order of us getting to that self-belief. I don't know. I was just really curious about the different components, because I personally wouldn't sit there going, I have self-doubt. However, I know in more recent times I have lacked my self-trust. I believed I could. I didn't necessarily doubt that I would make it, but the world around me had so materially shifted. I lacked a sense of real trust in myself, because the world and the safety points around me wasn't quite the same anymore. And the narrative, I guess, that I had told myself had fundamentally changed. So, you know, and is that shaking one's belief? I don't know. It's a curious one, and I don't think, without sitting here and then rewriting the rules on everything and still be sitting here tomorrow night at the same time, I'm not sure we'll answer it. So.
I think that's so interesting, Laura. And the key word I think that you've used there for me is narrative, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think what all those self this, self that, self the other are all sides of the same thing. It's all, you know, interrelated, and it's an interrelated narrative that we create. And always when we're sitting doing things like this and we're using self a lot, I think to myself, well, what is self, right? We're talking about self-trust, we're talking about self-belief, and we will no doubt talk about self-worth and self-esteem and self-love and all these other things in and around this subject of unshakable belief. So what is self? And I guess when it comes down to it, we are just conscious beings aware of ourselves, right? So that's self, and it's our divine nature, right? It's our essence. And, you know, Mark mentioned truth. It's our truth. Because everything else is a construct. Everything else is a story. Everything else is a narrative. And we carry around these unconscious systems, which are narratives that we've created over time. And it's those things that, in order to have unshakable belief, we need to be completely aware of. We need to have hunted in every deep, dark recess of our belief system and our value system, and all these unconscious stories and rules that we've taken on and told ourselves and programmed into our unconscious mind over years. So to have unshakable belief, we need to have great self-awareness. We need to be aware of all that stuff. And the other thing we need to be really aware of is our emotional trauma, because this is what's going to dictate our emotional state a lot. If we're not aware of our emotional trauma and we're easily triggered, and, you know, we spend a lot of time in frustration or irritation or stress, this is all healing we need to do and stuff we need to find out about ourselves and be aware of in order to have unshakable belief. Because fear is always going to be there. You know, fear is a natural part of being human. It helps our awareness. It keeps us safe. But where fear starts to become toxic and corrosive and unhelpful is when it becomes part of our narrative. That's what then makes us play small, because we don't have unshakable belief. And in order to get out of our comfort zone, do the things that excite us, do the things that we're pulled towards, we need to work on our awareness so we do have unshakable belief. And it's about knowing yourself. That's what it comes down to. And one of the things I love about what you talk about a lot, Laura, is your 3 A's. Remind me what they are.
Acknowledge, act, attain.
Yeah, and for me, that's moving through levels of self-awareness. So acknowledge is that first thing of looking yourself in the mirror and seeing everything and loving and accepting. Acknowledge, and then the next two are the next bits of investigation you've got to do and actions you've got to take in order to get yourself to that anchored place where you're really comfortable in your own skin. So you do have unshakable belief, and you can create a narrative of unshakable belief, because that's what it is. It's a creation.
It is, and I think that's so true, because it is the narrative, it's the self-awareness, it's the story we need to tell ourselves, because it's different from per se one that's traumatized us, that's not helping us, that is limiting our self-belief ultimately. So it's back to Mark's lies that we're telling ourselves. So we're trying to turn that lie into something that is beneficial to us and changing the narrative. So is it just about self-awareness?
Well, on the self-awareness point, right? You can have unshakable belief and be completely wrong.
True.
And that's a dangerous thing. Like, we look at our modern world now, and people who have unshakable beliefs in flat Earth theory and all those other mad things, because there's an identity in that and a community that people find through these other belief systems and belief structures. And Dan reminded me of something on the comment to my post earlier on today, and a story that really taught me an awful lot about beliefs and belief structure when I was young. I remember growing up in Ireland, right? If you were on the Catholic side, you had to support Celtic. That was the rules, right? If you're on the other side, you had to support Rangers. That's the rules. Like, if you're a Protestant side, right? This is the rules. This is the system. And I remember one day, I was a kid, probably about 10. We were watching Celtic play Rangers on the TV, or maybe I was 12. And go on, Celtic was scoring, we were doing well. And my dad walked into the room, and Rangers scored. He started cheering the goals. What are you doing? Like, how can you do that? Like, you have to support. And then I was like, wait a second. And just in his one act, he showed me how it's just a thought. It's an idea. It's a decision to do this. It's not really, you don't have to do this. Now, unfortunately for him, I brought that into the idea of religion as well. And I went, wait a second, you can't tell me that this is our family's religion, because it's an idea too. It's by chance, by everything else in terms of a belief structure, But it was so instructive for me at the time, how you build yourself into certain communities by the belief that this is important to you, by the belief that this matters in a certain way, and then you could attach your identity into it. So then, to the point of unshakable belief, as Dan explained it brilliantly there, but it's also so dangerous, because if you take that unshakable belief at the wrong thing, if you decide I'm not going to go for self-awareness, or if you say, you know what, my identity is fine in this, it's comfortable in this, it works for me in this. And the way you go with this and you hold on to that. Now, look, supporting a team is one thing, right? But there's a lot more dangerous, unshakable beliefs that are out there. Like, in our world today is a perfect example of it. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's just the stuff people choose to believe, despite evidence, despite science, despite whatever, because it works for the story they want to tell. And it goes back to the narrative thing too, isn't it? Like, what's the story we want to tell is probably a whole part of where our belief is.
No, without a doubt. And I think that's the thing. And I think we can become so focused on that, we lose sort of almost perspective and context with that, because it's giving us something, because otherwise we wouldn't pursue it otherwise, would we? So I guess where I've gone to, and because you're absolutely spot on, Mark, having, for me, it's that thing of how do I describe it? But it's being grounded in ourselves and knowing what we want, irrespective of almost what's going on around us. I think that, and I don't know how I describe that, because it's slightly different than being self-aware. It's having a real strong sense of, I guess, strong sense of self, irrespective necessarily of what else is going on around you. So you're less influenced by what is going on around you. Because if you were influenced by what is going on around you, you're drawn by that, and your identity actually isn't your own identity. It is one shaped by what you are pursuing instead.
Yeah, and it's why critical thinking is so important, Laura. Thinking is so often not required in our day-to-day lives, and we do way too much thinking. But a lot of our thinking is given to us, and a lot of people want their thinking to be done for them, and that's a problem. We need to all have critical thought. So what I think you're sort of alluding to there, Laura, is core values, is understanding your own core values, what you yourself stand for as an individual, and not a belief system, a value system that somebody else has created, probably no smarter than you. And I think that's where unshakable belief can become dangerous, is unshakable belief in somebody else's set of rules, somebody else's set of ideas, and in something that might do harm to others.
And I think equally it leads to that whole thing back, as we were talking earlier on, about expectations. And then it's like, if that is the expectation, but that's not, something that we value, that's where there's the disconnect, that's where the stress comes, the anxiety comes, and that then can undermine our belief in ourselves, because there's not a congruence, because we're trying to align something that's internal with something that's external.
Yeah, that's really powerful stuff in terms of where our beliefs take us. And it's interesting how there's such a frame on the world that we live in. And it's not just even the beliefs we have of ourselves, it's the belief we have of others. And it's very interesting how, and because then that creates the little boxes and silos we can put everything else into, so that little frame works so well for us. But I remember being asked, I was doing a public speaking group coaching session with a group of people, and they were all there, and I was asking them, what's the reason you're here? Like at the start, what's the main thing that when you think of speaking, what words? And every of them had fear, had shame, judgment, all of these things that come because they believe they couldn't do it. They believe they would make a mistake. They believe they would be a disaster if they went to do it. Of course, right? And a lot of people are there. And I asked them, am I confident? And they said, oh yeah, you're so confident. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm coming across as confident because I'm not thinking about the things I can't do. I'm not allowing that doubt to come in and challenge my belief. And it's not a belief. I said, I know what I'm here to do. I know what I'm here to try to work out. I've done this before. So the confidence, and you said it earlier, Dan, about the landing for the pilot, the confidence was from doing the thing. So therefore, I didn't need to have a belief in my ability to do the thing. And then came across as confidence because it was natural and it was there. But it's not confidence. And like able to say to them, look, I'm not confident if I was doing this. If I was doing this, I wouldn't be confident. There's piles of things that I would not be confident doing. Do I believe I can't do them? I try not to. But of course, by times, I believe I can't do them. Because we all get to that. We suddenly have a chance to, can I do that? Wait a second, what am I challenging? What am I saying to myself here? What am I creating for myself? So I think it's an interesting conundrum. How are we creating that reality? Are we creating that reality based on the truth? Or are we creating that reality based on how we're feeling or how we want to feel?
Very interesting.
Because beliefs are our reality, isn't it? That's the lens through which we see the world and ourselves. And it's a creation. We make this, and we take them on from all sorts of different places. Especially when we're younger, we create this system based on the culture that we're in, on our education and what we see and hear, what our upbringing, what figures of authority tell us. We take that all on, and but all a belief is an idea or a thought that you've never questioned.
Yeah.
And we've got this whole system running of this stuff we've never questioned. And I think that's the important thing when it comes to beliefs, to constantly question them. Does this serve me? Is this a rule I really ought to be living by? Is this going to harm me and other people to believe this? Because the thing is with beliefs is they're all up for grabs.
I love that. They're all up for grabs. But you're right there. I mean, I think of some of the things I've challenged more recently, and I wouldn't sit there necessarily go, "Well, there's a belief I had," but almost subliminally, I can say that word. It's a belief or an expectation that I guess my peers have, where I'm going, those rules don't actually work for me. And I had this exact conversation with my brother over the summer, because I actually had to stop the conversation as my mother was busily telling me what I needed to do, because her belief system looked like this, because that was the world that she come. I'm going, look, hold on a moment. That's brilliant, but let me just put this into perspective here. 1, I don't have a partner. 2, I don't have any kids. So exactly why would I be doing this, and this, and this? Because that might get me the outcome that worked for you because of your narrative and because of your specific situations. But my situation is so utterly different. You can't measure me on that system, that narrative that you have. But I mean, I had to psychologically get myself to a place that I could actually say that out loud to them.
Were they baffled by that, Laura, when you said that, or did they get it?
My brother does, yes, but I think my mother is sort of learning to it. But
because we all do that all the time, don't we? I still catch myself doing it. It's a pattern I've noticed about myself, making assumptions and coming at things from my point of view and expecting everybody to share my point of view, because we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. We all have our own perspective, and you've got to be really aware of the fact that you're always coming at things from a perspective. So I really notice it now, the well-meaning advice, the stuff coming from people who just got no idea about your situation, and so it's completely pointless.
Because they're too busy, though. That's the problem, Dan. It's like, they're so busy that it's this whole thing of they don't want to actually listen and to understand your particular situation. They just want to give you a solution so they can move on to the next thing. And it's easy because they've got an narrative playing in the margin. I'm just kind of going, because I frequently get to, oh, well, you don't listen to me anyway. And I'm like, well, it's not that I don't listen. It's more the fact that it's just advice that actually doesn't make any sense to me in the world that I have. So, like, help me understand how it can help me, So, but it's really hard when, you're trying to establish unshakable belief in yourself, which, you believe you can do something, and you have a whole world around you that is saying, either doubting you because it doesn't fit their narrative.
Reflecting their own fear.
Yeah, completely. And I totally get that. And then you end up in another loop that goes along the lines of, oh, well, you don't speak to me these days. And I'm going, well, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. So, all joking aside, I think that's a really common narrative where, you're trying to establish your own belief in your, what you can do, but it's not the same as everybody else's around you. And so that can create a disconnect that can be quite hard to stand up to. And
very difficult.
Sorry?
Very difficult, yeah, if you're going against everyone else, yeah.
And so how can we remain strong in our belief without basically hiding and shutting ourselves off from the rest of the world?
I think that's a really good question, because we really need to dig into that. How do we create unshakable belief kind of part of this thing? And to the point you were talking there, like, as a coach, we all know if you're coaching someone and you give them your opinion, you've lost, you're wrong. Yeah. That's my experience. I remember doing that when I first became a coach and telling them, well, I think this, wait a second. They went, no. I went, okay, yeah, of course not. That's my opinion, that's not yours. But I remember talking to a guy, and he was looking to move from a public sector job. I was working with this guy for a while, public sector into a private sector. And every single person he worked with, he would ask, should I take this leap? Every single one of them would say, you're mad, why are you doing that? Don't be stupid. You've got such a good pension. 15 more years, you'll get your pension. You'll be guaranteed this great pension, And he said, so I don't know what to do. And I said, have you asked anyone who has actually done what you're going to do? He goes, oh, I know 2 people. So he asked the 2 people. And I said, what did they say? They said, do it. You know, okay, right? So can you see the difference in the belief thing here, right? And to your point, right? So if you always surround yourself with the people who doubt it, who don't want to, who are not going to willing to push your boundaries like you are, well, then you're going to get that side of it back. But to the point of the unshakable belief thing, and it an awful lot of this, I think, comes back to the self-talk as well, doesn't it? Because I can't do this, you know, I'm not strong enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not better than these people. All of this stuff, that's all the lack of things. And like when we try to find something that's true, that we can build a belief system on, or not even build a self-trust system on, like the easiest place to start, if anyone's there listening, they're going like, oh, you need not talk about creating unshakable belief. This is your starting point. I am enough.
Yeah.
I am enough is your starting point. Even just I am is your starting point. To Dan's point around the self, there it is, I am. So what do I choose to add to the I am in that sentence? Because once I choose, whatever I choose, that's what I'm creating. So if we want to create it, we begin with I am. And I think the hard work in that is to begin saying that to ourselves, is to actually be I am enough. Like I will be honest, in my practice when I do Qigong, first thing and the last thing I do as part of my practice is like, you know, I'm nearly this in the garden in the morning, and I'm saying to myself, I can't say, oh, I love you. I can't do that. I'm way too Northern European to be able to say something like that to myself, you know. Just not, it's not in the genes, I think. Like, but I can say to myself, I am enough.
Yeah,
you know, I am enough. I am enough, and I can say that to myself. And I don't need to believe it because I know there's a truth in it. I know there's an underlying truth.
Yeah, it's knowing, isn't it, Mark? And it's different, and I think that's where things really shift, when you can get to that place of knowing. And it just, you're so right about the I ams. And, you know, whatever you're saying in here and out of there that starts with I am, pay attention to it, because you are speaking into the world and creating. Thoughts become forms. So it's words that are powerful. So whatever follows I am, you've got to be really aware of that stuff. But the better you get to know yourself, the more you've stepped out of your comfort zone to see what you're capable of, the more you get to being knowing. And, you know, faith is always a leap, right? Mm-hmm. But faith is different to knowing. Sometimes, in order to take the first step, in order to push the envelope, to get out of the comfort zone, we have to have faith. And we have to go into it with unshakable belief, because what's the point of doing anything else? Mm-hmm. If we're making a choice to go and have a go at something and try something new, or try a change in our life, or try to approach a relationship differently, or a job differently, or shift our perspective, there's no point in doing anything other than unshakable belief. Yes, you are going to doubt yourself. Yes, you're going to speak to people who doubt you, who are going to project their stuff onto you. But tell yourself a positive story. And I'm with you, Mark. I do it when I'm running. And sometimes I must look like a madman sometimes, but luckily there's nobody in the valley where I live. And especially the last bit of my run is downhill. And I run down the hill shouting at the top of my voice, I am enough, I have enough, there is enough. I am enough, I have enough, there is enough. And I've got a great big cheesy grin on my face when I do it.
It brings a smile. It brings a smile.
But I think that's just it, though, Dan. It's the positive narrative thing. And I was thinking just today about, you know, the fact that we sit there and we use all this, you know, to use your word, Mark, this position of lack. You know, I've got imposter syndrome, and I you know me in the comfort zone. You know, I've got to get beyond my comfort zone. I don't like pushing myself out. These are narratives that, you know, we're just focusing on a lack of something. And I'm sort of sitting there going, but if that's what we're focusing on, that's almost undermining the narrative we're telling ourselves, rather than say, you know, maybe it is the case. No, I'm just learning and I'm expected to feel a bit like a wobble before I take my next step. That's part of the process. That's part of me creating unshakable belief, is that I'm switching a negative narrative to a positive one. And you're saying that, you know, I am enough. You know, maybe it is just flipping it on its head and saying, no, you know, I'm not people pleasing. I'm actually wanting to demonstrate that I'm kind, compassionate, and all the rest. That narrative is about what we stand for. That's us having belief. That's building a positive story in our self-belief to achieve what we want. I just think narratives are such an important part about what we say and about creating that really strong foundation in order to create that unshakable belief.
Well, we are story, like we're a story, and we get to a point where we start to believe the story we've been telling ourselves, and that's our challenge. Is like, is the story true that we're telling ourselves, or are we just believing this particular story that we're telling ourselves? Because I spent the day today with a company, and we were trying to figure out visions and mission and how the senior management team were all going to be in line with it, how we're going to align with it. Like, and at the end, we had told a great story, and this is what we had, and it's a true story, but it's a great story, and they can't wait now that they've figured out the story to bring the story to the rest of the company, bring it to the rest of the staff.
Yeah.
Because the buy-in is easy now, because now they're telling a story. And it's just like the fact that there's a trust in the story and a truth in the story, that it doesn't even need to be a belief that we fall into.
Yeah.
Previous to this, I wouldn't even send you their old mission and value statements that they got. They got some marketing people to do it quickly for a website. Like, and they're bland, like they're beige. Like, you wouldn't believe these things. You couldn't buy into them. Any company, anyone, AI, it's a generative AI kind of line, as opposed to what they have now, which is something that feels something real, that feels like it's tangible, it's trust. And maybe that's the thing, that we're all trying to look for that story that's true. And we find that story, like the unshakable belief, is because the story we're telling is a story of authenticity, is a story of actually who we are. So therefore, you can't shake that belief. Like, I remember reading about this years ago. I was reading it, was somebody who was telling me. It was somebody who was very true to themselves in a way. And they were talking about abuse they had received. And I was saying, well, why didn't this impact? Why? Like, that's tough to hear. And they went, yeah, but it doesn't affect me. It's not true. It's not part of my story. And I'm not going to take that in as part of it, because this is my story. This is my story of truth and authenticity. And like that, to me, it was like, okay, wow, that's unshakable belief. But it's more unshakable trust, and trust in the authenticity that they are who they need to be in the world. They are in their space in the world. And therefore, nothing can knock that down, and nothing has an impact on that. And that story that they're telling is the better story.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, because if I think back to my own specific situation, which was not too dissimilar to that, the bullying did impact me, because back to my point about the self-trust, because it was immediately after everything had happened 10 years ago, and I didn't have trust in myself. So it was almost, because I didn't have that stake in the ground, that bullying did impact me, because I had nothing to go against. Whereas if it happened now, where I'm a wholly different person, who I absolutely believe in myself, who I am, etc., what I value, like, no, it's not true. I don't. Whereas back then I hadn't got anything to go validated against. Very interesting, very interesting. So tell me, how do we stop that inner critic from shaking our belief?
Yeah, you have to learn to tune it out and placate it and talk back to it and tell it when it's not required and tell it when it's wrong.
Like a pesky child, hey?
That's how I deal with myself, Laura. And the thing that gets in the way of unshakable belief, and especially unshakable belief in yourself, is your ego and your mind.
Yeah.
Trying to keep you safe and telling you lies. Let's face it, telling you lies to just distract you, to deflect, to make you look over there instead of over there, because it wants you to be safe. It wants you to keep with what's familiar. It wants to apply the past to the present moment. And take control and keep you playing small. It's the ego that gets in the way of unshakable belief. And so when you have self-awareness, when you're really grounded in who you are, as you guys were talking about, you're aware of your ego. You're aware of that voice. You know where it comes from, and you can say to it, "No, it's cool. We're not getting eaten by bears here. We're fine. We're good.
Not today, anyway.
I don't need you to quickly fight and flight in right now. I'm nice and calm. I'm safe. I've got this." And, you know, at the end of the day, unshakable belief comes down to backing yourself. Once you know yourself, accept yourself, acknowledge everything about you, love yourself, back yourself, and know your limits. Know and that comes with experience, but it comes from trying stuff. It comes from giving stuff a go. The only failure is not giving things a go. Everything else is learning and growing, and it's through that learning and growing that we start to discover. I don't know if discover is the right word. If we start to understand who we are, it's only in relation to things that we choose to do and the actions we take that we define who we are and create that narrative.
No, I'm totally with you. So in essence, what because I'm very conscious of time, but so in essence, what we're saying is we have to just say yes to life. Is that right?
We do, but let's be very honest here, and it's a hard journey because here we are as middle-aged. Well, maybe you two are younger than my old self here, but here we are as middle-aged adults.
Now, I think actually, dare I say, I'm the eldest between the three of us.
Well, we won't. We're all equal. We're all equal.
There's a couple of years between us, hey.
when if to be middle, it means we've spent an entire lifetime building these beliefs and living behind them and trying to stay behind them. So I understand when we talk about learning to be your authentic self and being self-aware, right? For a lot of people, that can seem like a distance away. It can seem like, okay, that's very hard. How do I get there? Where do I start that work? Yeah. And so if you're doubting yourself right now, it's a long journey to get to the self-aware piece to understand what's going on. So what I say, the I am enough piece is critical, right? That's a critical thing for you to do. And the other thing that I always say is, one of the reasons why we have this doubt in ourselves is because we're challenged in a situation and our brain is a system, it's a tool. It goes looking for the information. So we're suddenly confronted by a situation we're not sure about. And the brain goes, nope, you've never done this before. This could be a disaster. There's a whole list of what could go wrong. And that's because we haven't built the list of what could go right. So when we're struggling, instead we go, you know what, I'm here to learn. I can grow by taking this opportunity. I know I am enough. This is an opportunity to be a better person from where I was. So suddenly when our brain goes looking for, the doubt comes in, our brain goes looking to feed the doubt. It has the doubt, but it also has an opposite side that allows us the opportunity to balance it out and learn in the situation. I think for someone who is struggling because it's the start of a journey into this, that's a good way to start. A good way to start is to write out the truth of the situation. What's really going on there, so that you have that lodged into your brain that there's two sides to the story, and allow yourself then to pick which side of the story you're going to go for.
No, and that makes so much. I mean, it's one of the key reasons why acknowledge is the first step in the work I do, because that kind of just, as my mother would say, puke on a page. Because I'm sounding slightly flippant, but it's like, because it's just getting it out there. It's whatever comes out. And so, it is the first time you do it, it is slightly messy, but it's getting it out there so that you can see it, so you can actually start and almost picking through the pieces and going, how do I change that narrative to something that's going to work for me? And that is the critical first part, because otherwise,
honesty, Laura, isn't it? That's what it's all about. It's honesty. It's putting that down on paper or speaking out loud to someone and speaking your truth. It's getting your truth out into the world and out on paper, because when in here you can come at it from so many different angles and thoughts jump from this to this to this, that you can get lost in cycles of thought that are, and your mind plays all sorts of tricks on you. When you get things out actually into the world, when you speak things or when you write them down in an honest and authentic way and really confront what's going on, as Mark says, that's step one. And backing yourself to whatever is going on, that you can figure it out, that I am enough, that, all these horrible things you may have taken on as a child of not being enough and being stupid and not fitting in and all these things, they're not true. You are enough, and start from that point. And I always imagine it, like plant machinery, when it's like around here, there's lots of forestry and they're carrying great trees. And in order to do that, so that imagine the trees is the doubt, you know, which is a feature of being human that's going to come up whenever you're doing anything good. It's going
Yeah,
to get in. You have to weigh it down. So they have these massive, great counterweights that they put on the back of the plant machine that just doesn't go tumbling down the hill. So that's building the other narrative of I can. You know, the great car maker Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right.
No, you're absolutely spot on. And, you know, I think in short, we need to be telling ourselves that I am or we are enough. And actually, that leads me very nicely on to setting the scene for next month. Are you truly living? When we're going to be talking about Christmas. No, we're not going to be talking about Christmas. We're talking about modern living, making peace with modern living. Which actually plays very much into the fact that no, we do not need perfect Christmas.
Yeah, well, Christmas is such a hyper example of modern living, isn't it? When suddenly we're all crammed together, we're all families that, you know, don't like each other and are stressed and drunk. This is modern life, you know, in 100 miles an hour. So I think
you're going to need an awful lot of unshakable belief to be able to get through your day. Fabulous, guys. Well, look, I'm going to say good night and thank you for joining us. And I will see you next month. 19. Bye.